Welcome to Death and Disco, the podcast where we explore how embracing death is the key to making the most out of life. Today, I have someone who is very aligned with that message. Her name is Lauren Carroll, who is a death educator, a formal funeral director, and co-founder of Mort and the Death Wives. Her work weaves community and family back into the death space, realigning our culture with the earth and helping humans remember how to love one another. She's a licensed psilocybin facilitator who works with grief and end-of-life processing through plant medicine, ritual, and ceremony, and is a former board member of the National Home Funeral Alliance. She lives on an urban farm at the base of a mountain, raising 2 kids, tending animals, and dancing around bonfires on the full moon. Hell yeah, I'm going to come to one of those soon. Welcome to the show, Lauren Carroll. Lauren, I want to hear in your own words because I clearly am drinking the Kool-Aid that you are sharing with everyone. But why do you believe we all need to have a relationship with death?
So it's funny because when I was a teenager, I had a tragedy. My uncle was killed in a car accident. And I think that there's always that catalyst. I always say, what was your initiation into death and grief? And so from the age of 13 to 19, I was absolutely terrified of death, wanted nothing to do with cemeteries or anything. It's hilarious. My family and best friends are always still I can't believe you went into death work. I was like, I know, right? But I had this whole literal life-changing moment when I was working in a funeral home and I was called to go pick up a stillborn baby from the hospital, which when I took this job at the funeral home, it was literally because my boyfriend asked me to. And I was just like, of course. I said, as long as I don't have to do it with dead bodies or anything like that, I will. I had my little cubby and I literally typed on a typewriter death certificates. This was 21 years ago.
Wow.
And I did. I stayed in my own little corner, had nothing to do with funerals or anything like that. And then one day they called and they made it seem like it was no big deal. We're at a funeral. We need somebody to go pick up this baby from the hospital. It's just a baby. Can you just go?
Oh my God.
And so the whole situation was just weird to me. And they were like, bring a box. I brought a blanket instead. And he was completely wrapped up and swaddled in my arms because he was full term. And I buckled him into my little Volkswagen Jetta because this was Southern California in the early 2000s. And I was sitting there shaking. I mean, I was shaking, palms sweating, felt like I was about to throw up. And then I had this overwhelming sense of calm and love. And the way I describe it a lot is when you wake up at your grandparents' house and your grandma's like, what do you want for breakfast? And you just feel love.
Yeah.
I felt that. And I realized it was coming from him and all the love that his parents have been putting into him all these, months. And that fear, it was in that moment, all of my fear of death went away. And I realized it's just love. It's just this continuation of love.
Wow.
And so I went back and I was like, well, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to help people in the hardest moments get through it. And then as I continue doing this work, you can't help but love life. The more you interface with death daily, you appreciate everything. There's this weird sense of comfort that things end because it makes them that much more important too. And we live in a society that's always clinging and wants to hold on to things forever. And I have to remind people we wish we could have things forever, but what makes them so beautiful and so meaningful is that they end, is that there is a death to it. And further working into my funeral career, I would see people in my funeral home that had no idea that they would be in the funeral home that day.
Yeah.
Death wasn't just for the elderly. Death could happen anywhere, any moment to anybody. And in that, I go, wow, look at that tree. I have the gift today to see the changing colors in this tree right now. And it's people are like, you're so in love with death. I'm like, actually, I'm really in love with life.
Yeah.
And it's because of death. And I'm so grateful. And I want to honor death and the end of life as much as possible because it makes everything have meaning.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So what I'm hearing is that wow, that's like such a crazy experience. Like
Yeah. I
I
know.
can just I almost can just like feel I would imagine just like resistance at first to feeling like this dead infant in your arms. And but then like the softening that kind of happens too once you start to when you felt his love. Like that is so intense.
Mhm. And I think that that happens a lot with people too. Like there's this fear of death and a dead body. And
Yeah.
then you actually spend time and like this calmness to my nervous system happened. And I just realized like this was just somebody that was really, really loved that's now in my care. Wow. Like I can't believe that I am so privileged. And I'm just this 21-year-old,
Yeah.
girl. And
Yeah.
yeah, he changed my life for sure.
That's crazy. So, how do you because I feel like some people could get really stuck on the fact that they're with like this dead baby, right? And like really focused on the terror and the sadness and the grief, and yet you were able to see almost like the duality in it and to see the love. Is that a muscle you feel like you have to strengthen? Do you think that's something that is inherent in who you are? Like when you see people engaging with death, like is it mainly the focus on the death and the dying and the morbidity of it, or how are you helping them kind of see
I
more of the light?
Yeah, I think I'm like a mixture of maybe I'm a little bit looser around things than other people. But what I have found is most people are just afraid and they haven't talked about it. And
Okay.
the more that they talk about it, and the more that they share the grief of their person, it's like sometimes I think the grief and the fear covers up the love part and they
Yeah.
forget about it because all they feel is if I think about them, I'll feel grief. So I don't want to. And so that kind of goes over to all the other future deaths that take place in their life, where
Okay.
it's just this like heaviness that's bad
Right.
versus processing it, living with it, integrating this grief into your life, and realizing that it's just, again, this continuation of the love that you felt for somebody. But people don't get to that layer because we don't live in a society that, like, really at all supports grief.
Right. Right.
On
Yeah.
a
Are most of your clients that are coming to you people who've experienced a type of loss?
well, yeah, I would say.
Yeah.
I've trained death doulas for years now, and most people come because they had some sort of tragedy that either was very horrific or was really beautiful,
Mhm.
and they want to work on that trauma or learn more so they can offer this more beautiful experience to more people.
Right.
And so there's always death and grief is typically what is bringing people to my classes or to find me to do work. It really, yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, and so, like, I found, I was doing, like, grief coaching before I've kind of stepped into this life coaching, but I really, like, see death as the modality, which is kinda
Mhm.
crazy. But I feel like so much of it was helping people understand that, like, emotions like grief, anger, and sadness aren't bad, like, the darker, lower vibration emotions are, like, okay, and then a
Mhm.
big part of it was also releasing the narrative around death, like, really helping people parse out like the conditioning around it being this like bad awful thing that death is out to get you, grim reaper, or the fact that like no one dies, right? Like there's so much story and projection on death, and then helping people see it more as the natural passage that it is. So how
Mhm.
does that come up in your work a lot too, or
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think when people can accept and see death as just something that's naturally going to happen to any of us, like when you take one of my classes, I always get to say, 100% guaranteed you will use this information at one point.
yeah,
There's not all classes can speak like that, but I
right,
know that we will all experience death, either our own or somebody else that we love or have cared about. And having this like resistance to it and saying, no, I don't want anything to do with it. That's bad. Like you were saying, like grief is low vibration. I don't want to live in that space.
yeah,
all you're doing is pushing aside a huge part of life.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if you want to live fully, you have to live fully and embrace all pieces of it. And so when people are pushing their grief to the side, pushing the concept of death and dying to the side, they aren't really fully living.
Right. I agree. It's like the full spectrum. Like, I like to think of it as like playing a piano. Like, you have like your light and airy, fluffy tunes up here that society is like, stay up here. This is so great. But then like Beethoven, like all of his stuff was like so like melancholy and like dark and deep. And like, I just see grief as like this other end of the piano, like it's a
Yeah.
different tune.
And I mean, if we didn't have grief, we wouldn't have art. Like, we wouldn't
Right.
have these beautiful, gut wrenching songs if we didn't have grief and we didn't have loss. Like, so much beauty actually can come out of it. And the light is great and fun, but we also need that space to go deep into. I mean, I feel like that's where things really come alive for people when they're in those darkest depths, when they can really explore what they've hidden and put down. And that's why I think so many artists look like they might suffer from depression or something like that. But I
Mhm.
think that they just see that in that rich soil of dark is where all these beautiful things actually grow from.
I couldn't agree more, and I feel like you need to experience the dark in order for light to even exist, right? It's like we live in that duality, and I think the greatest duality is life and death. So if you're not embracing your death, then or maybe embrace is a strong word, but like accepting that we're
Mhm.
going to die, then yeah, how are you even living?
Yeah, it's so true. And I think that when people like hear me first talk about it, and then by the end of the conversation, and I've said things like, well, if you did die, like, what would your funeral be like, and try and make it fun, by the end of the conversation, people are like, oh, that wasn't so bad, and why do I feel better, why do I feel lighter?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, talking about it isn't going to make you die.
Totally.
There's this great he started the Death Cafe, but he passed away. And he says, we talk about sex all the time in America and people don't get pregnant. We can talk about death and we're not going to die. Like, it's the same thing, but it's such, so again, has this like taboo of, if I talk about it, it's going to happen. And then I usually want to say, yes, it will, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen immediately right now. But really, it's like taking that first little leap. And I think it's the same thing with grief work.
Yeah.
It's people have to take that first little leap because they're scared that if they do, they'll just go into the deep end and drown and never get
Mhm.
out. And I'm
Totally.
like, no, your body is built to grieve. Like, trust that your body knows what to do and knows how to process this. But what your body doesn't know how to do is to live in this like high anxiety, high fear state all the time, right?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
we can just like surrender and go into it every single time, somebody could be sobbing for 4 hours and they're like, wow, I feel so good. You're so
Yes,
happy. You're
it's
like,
so true.
just told me all of the most horrible, tragic things that have happened. And then they feel so much better. And I'm like,
I
see?
couldn't agree more. Yeah. So, so yeah, like you talked about the fear of talking about it, maybe making it happen, and then the fear of going into emotions, this like fear of like if I go into it, I'm going to drown and I'm never going to like come back. And then are there any other like common fears that you see in the death and mortality space?
I mean, I think a lot of people have a fear of how they'll die. And
Mm,
that's one of those things, like, most of us will die a natural death or a slower death. So from a disease or elder age or something like that. But people just have this fear that it could happen at any time, anywhere. And my concept is like, well, what can you do about it? Like, what
right.
control do you have over that? And it's controlling you right
Totally.
now by having that fear.
Yep.
Like,
Let's like
again, it's one of those things. Gotta let go.
That's such a good I think that's a really key point here in terms of how having the conversation around death and really engaging with your mortality and the impermanence of life actually liberates you. Because if you do just accept it and not just at a cerebral level, but at like an embodied level, it's like I went skydiving a couple of weeks ago and I got so many comments like, "Weren't you scared?" Like my dad was like, "Well, that's really great, but like you have 2 kids, like don't do that again." You know? And to me, I just feel like I'm at this place where I'm like, I know I'm gonna die and I accept that whenever it happens, it's just I feel like there's some divine intelligence to it. Like just like a forest fire that burns and then like we regenerate growth and it's like part of just the natural cycle of life. I do have to say I do have a little bit of fear around being in a lot of pain.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's understandable. And if you have a good, I don't think we should die alone. I think we need a community. I think we need our team around us. And when we have that kind of support and when we can process things, I think that there's two parts to dying that are painful. There's like this emotional pain when we haven't processed our life, when we feel like we're going to miss out. And that
Mhm.
does cause physical pain too. Like having those intense feelings does
Totally.
physically cause pain to your body. And of course, depending on what disease you're dying from, that can cause pain too. And I think what a really cool thing that death doulas and end of life workers do is they support people for that emotional part,
Yeah.
hopefully alleviating some of that pain so that it's easier. Again, I'm going to use this word of like surrendering in. And when you do, when you have that release, it's kind of like childbirth too, right? Like
Yeah.
when it is holding on and can't open, it's going to be a harder, much painful death. But I
Yeah.
think when people are prepared for their death, have accepted it a little bit more, have that support and some morphine,
Totally.
it
Yeah.
it really I've seen the pain that people carry not there anymore by the end.
I love that. So it's the physical pain and the emotional pain, the like fear of missing out and the regrets. And that's what I want to dive into right now because I really believe that we can take that deathbed perspective. And instead of waiting to the end of our life, like, why don't we start engaging with these questions now and using them as a compass to live, a more alive life, a more aligned life, something that's true to ourselves. So what would you say? Because I've read about like the 5 regrets of the dying, and I'm like, oh, okay, they know, like they've lived their life. So how can I take these lessons and apply it to mine? But what do you see most people struggling with or regretting at the end of their life, wishing they could have done things differently?
I think a lot of people just think that their life didn't matter, which is
Mm,
really
mm.
interesting.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's just listening to their story or repeating things back to them to remind them like yes, we have this really fantastical idea like that our lives are supposed to look a certain way and if they
Totally.
didn't look that way then we failed. And
Mhm.
so even people who maybe had success didn't have the family. Maybe people who had the family didn't have the success. And so there's always these like, did I do enough in my life? I think that
Yeah,
that's a really common thing that comes up. And the way that you work with that is there's things like legacy work, for example.
yeah.
There's a thing called an ethical will. I don't know if you've ever heard about
Mm-mm,
this.
mm-mm.
Um, it's actually in the Jewish tradition, some of these have gone down generations of generations of generations, but it's not giving things, it's giving your ethics, your beliefs,
Mm,
passing that down.
beautiful.
So, a question, for example, is what describe love? What does love mean to you? Or what did you have to do to overcome the hardest moment of your life?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
people can reflect, and it doesn't matter if you had the mansion or the family, we've all had those experiences.
yeah,
So we can write our stories and pass it down. And I can tell you, my great grandpa did a great job on ancestor work and legacy work. And I have letters from like the 1880s of ancestors I never knew.
that's
And I
awesome.
cherish it because we do continue on after we're
Yeah,
like through our children, through our family, even through our friends and how we've influenced them. So everybody does have a legacy, but that's usually what people think they don't have. And then when they realize they do, that's when that softening happens. That's when that acceptance
yeah.
more.
This is really important, I think, for our listeners to just like hold on to because what I see and what terror management theory I had Sheldon Solomon on the
Yes.
podcast. Yeah, is that we are so concerned with this like belief around like, do I matter? We need to know that we matter. And like you said, like so much of our society creates this image of what that looks like, that it needs to be this like big, shiny, yeah, like success and right. But it's like that looks different to everyone. And I think what's interesting is when it comes to someone on their deathbed, and I've done a couple like death ceremonies with friends and family here. It's like the things that actually matter at the end are just like love and connection um and yeah, I mean, are there anyone who's like I guess you like you said like some people are still worried about the success, but you help them realize that it was really just around their sense of self-worth and if they mattered.
And I think too, we like really have stepped away from community in our society. So many people just didn't feel like held and supported throughout their life either. And those
Mhm.
feelings come up at the end as well. And then, like you were saying, but then when that love shows up and that's there and that's present, that is really, that's it. That's all that matters.
Yeah, I think this is just so key, like the community aspect of it too, and the connection to our ancestors. Because I read when I read the Worm at the Core, and I really started to see through the illusion of what matters in life, right? Like seeing that so much of my life was driven by these scripts that society basically fed me around how I should live my life. I did go into a bit of an existential crisis because I was like, well, if I'm just like this little glitter speck, what the fuck am I even doing here? Like I felt like really apathetic. And what helped me was realizing that like I am connected not just to the people here into my life, but that my ancestors are also like had this crazy impact and like set up the life that I have right now, and that I'm actually doing that for not just my kids, but their kids and other generations to come, and how it is just like this massive like we are like weaving different threads across space and time, but we have completely lost that. And I know part of your mission is bringing that community back. So how are you doing that through your work right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, we can't do anything without community. We are supposed to grieve in community. That's why we have funerals. And
Mhm.
when I was a funeral director, I kept seeing people step away from that or say like, "Oh, direct cremation, we'll do something later." And what they're missing out on is that community aspect and people coming together and being able to grieve together. And when they grieve together, it's when they see each other
Yeah.
and reconnect with each other in that space. Like weddings and funerals are the places that people usually come to reconnect. And when I feel like loneliness is definitely an epidemic that people don't
Hmm.
talk about.
Hmm.
But community heals that, right? But it also is what our ancestors did and know. So it's almost foreign in our bodies to not have this support at the end of life, to not tend to our own dead at home and have home vigils. And I even say it's foreign for us not to have rituals and ceremonies and mark these rites of passages that we go to through,
Right.
including death, because that's all our ancestors knew. So
Mhm.
therefore, it's all our body knows. But it's almost like the people who decide, oh, I can't cry. If I do, I'll never get out of it. I feel like we are physically fighting everything our ancestors knew and carried and held because we're in modern times now and we're supposed to be this way. And our ancestors are like, what? Like, I'm really glad that you guys can vote. That's great. But what happened to like farming? What happened to neighbors making bread for each other? Like all of those things that really shaped humanity, shaped who we were.
Yeah.
And we try to step away from it. It affects all aspects of our life from birth and how we birth to death and how we die. And I think that when people start putting those pieces together and like have their own aha moments, is like,
Mhm.
whoa, we do. I really naively thought COVID was going to bring us together. Like, whoa, we survived that, guys. Like,
Yeah.
it divided us more than anything. And it makes me think that it was probably people's fear, right?
Mhm.
Fear of death, not trusting people because they carry this fear and this grief. And so I'm like, oh, wait, people need to do some work around grief and death before they can connect with each other again. Because
Ugh.
there's this gap and we are trying to fix it by bringing people back together.
I completely agree. Like, I've literally thought, because I was on a soul searching journey as I kind of transitioned from grief coach into the more of like life coach. And I was like, how is what I'm doing actually shaping the collective, like for the better? And I truly believe that so much of the divide that we see is because we have unchecked ego and we're afraid. And
Mhm.
if we could all just realize that, like, we look like we're all only here for that little glitter speck in time. And how do we accept that? Because so much of the fear, even when it comes to just expressing yourself online, right? Or to a friend or to your in-laws, like all of that is those fears are just their survival patterns around death, right?
Mhm.
Trying to keep us alive. It's just false protection. And so if you can really get to the root of the issue, which is death, I think all of that
Right.
starts to dissolve. It's like there's nothing left to fear at a
Exactly.
very embodied level too.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think that if we had that healthier relationship with death, we would have a much healthier relationship with grief. And we know that people who don't have a healthy relationship with their grief, it ends up becoming toxic within them.
Yes.
So we have, I mean, I don't want to be too like extremist, but I do think like school shootings and the violence that we see is unprocessed grief and grief that has had nowhere to go. And so
Yeah.
people just carry it and it turns into anger and hate and not knowing where they belong. So they belong nowhere and they need to attack this group.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's just grief. Like,
No, I
come on,
completely
guys, let's do this.
I don't think you're extremist at all, and I think it's hard for some people to connect the dots, but you're right, like, who said this? It was, Valerie Carr. She wrote the book See No Stranger and Sage
Mhm.
Warrior, and
Yep.
she was talking about how, like, "Look, guys, there are no such thing as monsters." As atrocious as some of the things that are happening in the world are, like, all they're not monsters. They're wounded individuals, they're wounded humans who haven't processed, right, grief, trauma, and so they have these like false protections and they retaliate in dangerous ways for
Yeah.
humanity.
I
Yeah.
love that you brought her up. Her book is one of the readings in one of my classes. So
Oh, I think she's freaking amazing. Yeah. Yeah. So what are you said that you do a lot of like ceremony and rituals. I'm curious, can you tell us a little bit about what are some of the grieving rituals or death rituals, or how are you engaging people in these sacred spaces?
yeah, I mean, I think I usually like to start at death. Most people at the time of death are very quick to want to be away. Like call the funeral home, call hospice, leave the hospital room, whatever it is. And again, I think that that's the if I give into this grief right now, I won't get out of it, or I'm afraid. And I want to hold the space for people to be able to say, thank you. Like, so I have a blessing by Starhawk, who's amazing. And it starts from your head to your toes, and you bless each part of their body, pretty much thanking them for everything that they did while they were on this earth, whether it was to hold you in those arms or we end the feet with like for walking your own path in life we thank you, and
Mhm.
it gives people that moment to kind of settle into the fact that this is the body now of the person that you loved, because there's an energy shift that happens that I think too many people miss out on or are too afraid to sit with. And so that's where I like to start ceremony always, is in the moment after the death has taken place and just acknowledging it. Um, there's, I can't remember her name who said it, but she says, in that stillness, the heart and the mind can catch up with each other.
Yeah.
And so most people don't look at that as like a ceremony or a ritual time. It's
Yeah.
usually in American culture, it's like a, okay, next step, we need to do this, we need to do that, instead
Yeah.
of just being in it and being still. Um, and then like with everything, we are so unique. Like this is the hardest part about being a funeral director, was selling packages. Cause I'm like, nobody is a package. Like nobody needs a light blue steel casket. Like, no, what am I doing here? I did leave eventually and became an educator on how not to use corporate funeral homes, but uh,
So funny.
it's so
I
bad.
keep thinking back to My Girl.
No, that is exactly what
Yeah,
it
Yeah.
And it's not how we were supposed to be. Like, we have lived such unique lives. Why are we celebrated all the same at the end? And so bringing in these different rituals and ceremonies is celebrating the uniqueness of them, not. And I will say our brain needs that too. When we have
Mhm.
rituals and ceremonies, we make these little like bookmarks.
Yeah.
That's the way to think about it. The only ceremony that most people know of is like a birthday cake. Like, we always have this cake and we put wax in it and we light it on fire and it magically will grant us a wish, and we blow out the fire. And like, that's a ritual and we remember those. Like, it's bookmarked in
Yeah.
our brain. And death is a beautiful, sacred, heartbreaking, difficult, life-changing moment
Yeah.
that I think deserves to have bookmarks. And so another thing that we can do is, I think the hardest part for most people is when the funeral home does come and take them out of the house.
Mhm.
And so doing just a slight ritual of, hitting a gong or lighting a candle as they leave the threshold for the last time.
Mm.
Like, it's those little tiny moments that
Yeah.
you can do the simplest things, but that's ritual and that's ceremony. It's just saying this tiny moment matters. So
Yeah.
what can I do in this little tiny moment?
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and it's so hard sometimes, like, hindsight is always 2020, and you wish that you would have done things differently, because at the time of my husband's death 7 years ago, like, I was completely caught off guard by all of it, right? And, after he passed away, like, I didn't wanna be in the room with his body.
Mhm.
And I literally had my daughter come in and say her goodbyes. She was 3 at the time, and then I was like, "Let's go to the beach to make sure that we're not here when they take his body away," because I thought that would be, like, traumatic, right? Again, like, just so much
Yeah.
fear. And it was really interesting because when we got back and the hospital room was cleared out, Izzy looked at me and she's like, "Where'd daddy go?"
Mhm.
And I was, like, trying to explain cremation to, like, a 3-year-old, which wasn't like, it was
Yeah.
hard, but I was like, "Well, he's, like, up in the stars in the sky," and she just goes, like, "Poof?" Like, it wa like, I guess why I'm telling you this story is because it's like, yes, we do need ceremony and ritual and pauses to actually be present for what's happening, 'cause I mean, I've had to go back and reprocess so much of that and to try to I re-experience it in my mind's eye and in my heart in a way that is meaningful to me now, but yeah, we're just unprepared. S
Yeah. And it's that, like I was saying, the heart and the mind need time to catch up with each
Yep.
other. Because it's like, okay, sure. Like, our brain is like, that happened. No, it didn't. Like, I don't really know. And then part of your heart is like, this is happening. It's breaking. And then your brain's like, no, I'm protecting you. And I
Yeah.
think we have to have that communication. It
Yeah.
needs to take place, because if not, I've seen what I call like lingering grief, like almost ghosty grief of
Mm,
who weren't there or who didn't get to say goodbye to the body, who still have this little feeling like they could come through the door, right? Because there
mhm.
wasn't that heart mind connection moment of just sitting and processing and being with the dead. And that's our cultural problem too. We
Right.
set up so that, people are living in other states and their family members might be in assisted living, hundreds of miles away.
Yeah.
And we don't have people dying at home as often because we are very much a life focused society that we will fight until the very, very end. So
Right.
people still die in hospitals, and hospitals don't give you, they're like, okay, we need this room. Like, have you said your goodbyes yet? So
Yeah.
we aren't creating space for death in our own lives yet. And I always
Right.
tell people, if you want that viewing, you have to go to a funeral home and you have to pay them money and you have to rent out the space and pay for that space. And usually, I mean, for me, going into a funeral home as not a funeral director, it always feels very sterile and foreign and not a place that I fully could show up to say goodbye to somebody I love.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree, and we were lucky that we did have that we had a nice home that someone, I call her my guardian angel, just gave to us. And
Oh,
that absolutely changed the I think it lessened the trauma of that experience, right? It allowed me to hold both the devastation of what was happening and also like the beauty of it all, because we were like right outside, like the ocean was right out there. I was like, oh my gosh, Ian like died, and I think his soul is like literally surfing right now as the sunrise. Like I could just see it as more of a passage than like my husband's death, like that, the two different stories that exist, right? Because there's, I love how Hope Edelman says it. She says the facts of the events stay the same, but it's the story that changes, and how like I had one story at one time, but you can write a whole nother one years later or maybe in tandem. Um, but so, okay. So listeners, you will have a loved one die. You will die
I'm
too.
sorry.
Like
I'm sorry
I
to tell
just,
you.
I just like cannot emphasize this enough, because I feel like someone could be listening to this conversation. Like I'm trying to call people out right now, because I think what we do is we hear about people dying and then we file it away as, oh, that's somebody else. And
Mhm.
it's like already like our protections are up. And I'm just thinking of like, God, like if I could spare one other person from having like my experience and having more of like the experience that you provide for your clients, I'm like, that is the amount of healing that happens and the amount of acceptance. And then not just around the loss, but then in how you live your life moving forward. Like it's so important.
And I don't wanna, like, toot my own horn, but I think if people had that experience, right, it would transform how they grieve and how they live, so then we wouldn't see so much violence and separation, because people would have gone through this same beautiful sacred thing together
Yeah.
and not carry this toxic grief forward, because they have had a chance to integrate it into their life and make meaning of it, because they were able to slow down and really be in the
Yeah.
process of death and
Oh,
dying.
I have chills. It's so good. You like literally are an angel. Um, and anyone who's doing like death doula and work, like I just think it's so important. So
Yeah.
I want to get into the work around psilocybin and how that can be a modality, a medicine to help bring down the defenses around the dying process. I know my husband was 32 when he was dying, and he could not accept his death. Like wouldn't write letters to the kids, wouldn't really talk about it with me. It was just like, again, defenses, nope, we're going to beat this. So, how do you see that supporting people?
Wish I could have given him
I
psilocybin. I
know.
wish I would have known about it sooner. My best friend's husband died, and he was very much the same, had that same kind of feeling, and I think that's really normal.
Yeah.
You're angry, right? Like,
Yeah.
why is this happening to me? This isn't fair. But like you said, psilocybin is this magical thing that does it takes down those defenses, lets your heart be a little bit more open. And I think too, for me, it connects you to something greater than you. And that brings me so much comfort. So I'll tell my backstory.
Yeah.
I had never, I did mushrooms when I was in high school and like whatever. And it was weird.
Really
Sometimes
fun or scary.
and it was while I was teaching that a student said, "Have you heard about doing psilocybin for people at the end of life?" And I was like, "No, but that sounds really interesting." And 2 months later, I got a diagnosis with this really super rare disease called pulmonary arterial hypertension.
Mm.
And I was given, it's a chronic terminal disease. So at the time, they were like, "You have 7 to 10 years." And I was like, "Oh, okay. All right." Like, already, but I mean, the cool thing is I'm super death accepting. The
Because you
shitty
were already working at the funeral home at this time.
I had already left the funeral home. I
Okay.
was doing
So,
full-time death education at this point. This was only 3 years ago. Um, I'm doing great. I'll just say that. I did a clinical trial on great meds. I pretty much don't have the disease, and I honestly think it was psilocybin. I'll get to that. But I have 2 kids. If I didn't have my kids, I'd be like, "All right, life, let's do this. Like, I'm gonna ride you hard until I'm out of here." But I have 2 teenagers, and I'm like, "What are they gonna do without me?" I'm a single
yeah.
mom. Like, there's just all these things. And so I didn't know how to process that. And then I remembered her and I said, "Hey, what if we do a retreat where we process death doulas' fears around their own dying?" And she was like,
Wow.
"Yeah, let's do that." So we found a facilitator, rented out a room in Denver, or a house in Denver, and we did it in a very ceremonial way, which I had never done before. And oh my gosh, like I think I cried for 6 hours straight. And so from the outside, people were very concerned and like, oh my gosh, is she okay?
Yeah.
And then on the other side, the next day, I changed. I was a changed person. People can tell you like that
Wow.
before journey Lauren and who she is now. And I'm so, so grateful because I had no idea that I could be so, I don't want to say I was healed, but it was, I had so many remembrances and these connections and releases of these fears that I was holding on to. And it was like there was these things that happened and ancestors who came forward and just, there's things that you just don't have words for and you never will. And that's okay. And then I said, oh my gosh, I think this is what I want to do now too for the rest of my life. I had my aha moment with the little baby. And now here I am 20 years later and having an aha moment with my own mortality and psilocybin and what it did for me. So I've
Okay.
gone full speed into that. And so far I've been working with people at the end of their life. But I do, and I am also not really promoting it. Most of the stuff I do is underground work still.
Mhm. Mhm.
Illegal setting, so I do also work above ground. But it's a little bit more restrictive in ways, of course,
Right.
because that's how government works. Um, but most of my in-person retreats are really based on people who want to be end-of-life workers and death doulas needing to process their own grief before they can truly and authentically step into a space where they can hold that space for other grievers.
That makes so
Because
much sense. Yeah.
yeah, like we said at the beginning, a lot of people come into this work because they had their own grief, they had their own tragedy, right?
Mhm.
So if you're carrying that into a space of more grief, it's not going to work out. You'll get burned out or you'll carry that into the families that you're serving. So these retreats help people really process whatever they're holding on. And it's those defenses get lowered. There's new neural pathways that are made where it's like trauma does this crazy thing where it lies to us.
Mhm. Yeah.
And psilocybin tells us the truth again. And it's such a beautiful thing for people to come out of it. And maybe it looks really difficult from the outside because it can be, right?
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
all of this stuff is coming up. And I just think psilocybin itself is just so heart opening that you just feel everything.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've definitely had some really beautiful psilocybin experiences and then some really hard ones, but like hard in good because
Yeah.
it helped me move through something that needed to be processed and released. And I can absolutely see the value in terms of being a death doula, not just for, to move through your own grief and fears around dying, but to also really um like hold the perspective for the person who is dying, like, and to really understand what they might be facing. Like, are you like, I guess when you're doing the psilocybin journeys, like, how do you do it with enough intention so that people aren't like blasting off into the
I
ethers?
I well, I don't do like heroic doses in
Right,
group,
right.
that's for sure. Um, so if I'm working underground, I have it actually done very intuitively where I lay out the mushrooms and have people kind of like
Right.
put their hands over and see what calls to them.
Mhm.
And typically people pick exactly what they need.
Yeah.
And I just trust that. If somebody has like a giant handful, I say, let's put those down and pick some from that giant handful.
Right, yeah.
Totally not the right thing. But doing the like prep work ahead of time, having people journal, like, so I'm having a retreat at the end of this month in Monument, and I'm already having people kind of prepare, like, what are your intentions? Why are you coming to this retreat? And just kind of getting that to the surface for them.
Mhm.
And you have to do that excavation work, I think, before you
Before.
go into the journey.
Yeah.
And that makes it a little bit more, you can never, like, you can say, I want to work on my relationship with my dad. And then all of a sudden you're like in unicorn land the whole time. But then you come out of it and everything makes sense about your relationship with your dad. Like, I don't I don't know how to explain it, but that's the truth of the matter. Um,
Yeah.
so doing the prep work, I think, is really, really important, and trusting the facilitator, having a relationship with them where you feel like you can really explore and let those defenses down because you're with somebody you feel safe to do those things with. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I just feel like psilocybin, it helps you bypass so much of the conscious mind, and it
Bypass ourselves, right?
right, right, like and I think too, like, I've had journeys just you just see life from such a higher perspective. It's kind of like that dissolving of the ego and
Mhm.
seeing like, yeah, like, I am just here for, like, a moment in time and, like, accepting it more, like, it's the interconnectedness of it all and the naturalness of it all, so and, I had a plant medicine facilitator on here before. He does more, like, he does different type of work, but he was talking about mushrooms as, like, nature's alchemist.
Mhm.
Yeah, in terms of just, like, the dyeing and
They
fermentation and yeah.
I mean, of course I love them. They are decomposers, right? Like, they break down life, and they're the communicators. They're the mycelium. So,
Mhm.
they break down things, and then they can spread knowledge and messages all over our planet, which is so cool.
So cool.
If you wanna go, like, super woo-woo,
Yeah, I
if they're
do.
the ones always. If they're the ones that break down everything dead, aren't they the ones that broke down our ancestors? So doesn't that mean that they do carry ancestral
Um,
knowledge too?
yeah. It's so
See?
cool. It's so cool.
And fungi is their own, like, they're their own like, they aren't mammals, they aren't plants, like, they are their own special magical beings, and it doesn't matter what kind of mushroom, like, it can be one has psilocybin, but it could be like lion's mane, and we know that that expands our brain and does
Right,
so much magical things. So mushrooms are our greatest allies and BFFs, and they've always been here going like,
right.
"Hey, we can help you out." Like, and our ancestors knew that.
Yeah.
Our ancestors understood that when you needed to go find answers, you would go into the woods and you would take mushrooms, or you would go to the wise person who took mushrooms who had all the answers for you.
Yeah.
And then once again, we were like, nope, that's bad. That doesn't fit our narrative. Like, that's I honestly think the war on drugs was that's too spiritual and people know too much. We can't have that. We can't have it.
Yes, oh my
Can you
god, it's
imagine
so
if every
true.
politician, like, had to do a heroic jokes and have a big journey before
Okay.
they could enter office? Like,
Feel so funny because I think about this all the time. I'm like, literally, like, just the whole administration right now just needs a hero's dose of mushrooms. Like, it would
yeah,
take some times, like, and a lot of, like, time to, like, integrate that because
we would
I
need
just feel
some
like there's
good integrators.
yeah, but I'm like, that's what we need. It's just like getting out of ego, fear, and scarcity and back into our hearts and souls and to the connectedness of it all. Like,
And
yeah,
mushrooms are like that cheat sheet. They're like that instant highway that
yeah,
takes you there. And it's for some people, you only need it once, and
yeah,
that's it. Some
mhm,
people need it every 6 months. It's not like antidepressants where you take it every single day. It's like they start the work and they continue to do the work. And then if you can do the integration work,
yeah,
where just like with grief, you go through this huge experience, you have to make meaning of it. And you have to
mhm,
integrate it into your life for it to really take full effect. So if you
totally.
can do that, then yeah, you do become a changed person, and you do know that you're connected to everyone, and you know that, like, yeah, I might be that tree someday. That's cool. That's great.
Yes. Yeah, that was actually the last thing I wanted to ask you, or actually I have 2 more questions, but, you said that part of your work is about bringing people back into connection with the earth. Can you speak to that a little bit more in terms of how embracing death does that?
Yeah, I mean, so right now in America, more people are choosing fire cremation than anything else. Fire
Mm,
cremation is the absolute worst thing that we can do for our planet. And it's one of those things that most people don't know. Like, we have cremation, we have burial. Burial's just as bad for the most part.
really?
But for a long, long time, we put our bodies directly into the earth, right? we broke down, we became the earth again. This is a fun fact. There's 8 billion people that are alive. There's 109 billion people that are dead.
Wow.
So our earth survives off of death. And
Wow.
when we start separating ourselves from the earth by putting us in steel caskets and concrete vaults, for example, or cremating the body to where, unfortunately, the ashes themselves are toxic to the soil.
No
So
way.
people will scatter the ashes or they'll put them in lakes. And it's actually now they're finding some lakes where the fish are dying and all this stuff. So we've become so disconnected from our planet that even our death practices themselves hurt the planet. And so when you have that healthier relationship and this understanding, I think people go, oh, there's other things you can do. So there's water cremation and there's something called human composting or natural organic reduction, which are both eco-friendly and the body, in a way, returns to the earth. With
Yeah.
water cremation, you'll still get ashes back. You just get bones and this water that is now, we are meant to be fertilizer.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Like really, like the earth has given us so much our whole lives. Our body is the last thing that we can really give back to the earth.
Right.
And our current death practices don't do that at all. They do the opposite. And so having again these conversations even about our planet, what we're doing to her, what she has done for us,
Yeah.
and that in our death we can give her continued life.
Yeah.
That I think changes how we can see death too, as like, oh, it is really beautiful and important. And if we didn't have dead ancestors on this planet, we wouldn't have soil, we wouldn't have forests, we wouldn't have all these beautiful things.
I completely agree, and I didn't know that about cremation, so thank you, for those options because I will think
It's
about
always
that.
one of those things where I hate it's right. Like I wish I would have known
Right,
then.
right,
Most
totally.
people think fire cremation is the most eco-friendly thing.
Hmm.
And I think funeral homes kind of pushed that in the 90s when it first started becoming popular, but it's not. The amount of
Yeah,
emissions that we put out into the atmosphere, that alone
yeah.
is horrible. So, water cremation, it's available in so many states.
Mhm. I'll check
Yeah.
that out. Well, I mean, after this interview, I'm thinking like, man, I really wanna get specific about how I want to die, and, I have, like, my will and my, power of attorney and all of that set up, but, like, I haven't really put into words how I wanna go,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna be like, "Alright, hit up Lauren," and no,
Totally.
but
It's down
but,
the
like,
road
just to,
pretty
like,
much.
put it out there, like, I want the ceremony, but I think too, just it's so interesting because that separation from the earth, it does create more fear around death, right? Because
Mhm.
the natural everything in the natural world dies, but human beings see themselves as separate from that. And I believe that goes back to like a monotheistic God and saying that everything on earth was created for us instead of like, no, we're a part of this and we're stewards of the land and right. um
Like, if you wanna get really
How long do we have? No.
round 2. No,
Yeah.
there's
Do
so
you
many
think
good books that talk
totally.
about there's one called The Mushroom and the Cross, for example, or The Secret. I think it's called The Secret Religion, but it's saying that before there was this monotheist God, there was mushrooms, and that was where religion came from. And when people said they spoke to God, it was them having these rituals and having these ceremonies and speaking to God. But then, of course, a man, sorry men out there, but it
No,
is,
it's
it's like always white men that come in and are like, I want to ruin this.
I wanna yeah.
So then we got,
Probably had a small penis too, just saying.
I mean, it was
No,
a
it
king.
doesn't
So
matter, it
yeah,
doesn't matter,
most
you're
kings have small
yeah.
penises. And if they had done mushrooms themselves, we wouldn't be here today.
I love how
That's
we
how it
see
goes.
life. No, I
But yeah,
definitely wanna read
I
those books.
agree.
Yeah,
Our disconnect from the earth
yeah.
has like that we're above it and that it couldn't be further from the truth.
Could not. I completely agree. As I look at the skeleton behind you, decomposing back into the earth, it's so good.
Yep.
Okay, so clearly I could riff on this topic with you all day, but I just want to ask you a question that I ask everyone. So, if you granted that you have the privilege of living to as long 80s, 90s, 100s. You're lying on your deathbed and you look back at your life. Like, what does a life well lived mean to you?
Um, I always think that, and that's why I think I feel okay with death, knowing that I had a positive influence and helped somebody throughout life, whether that's as a mom, a friend, a lover, whatever that is, that I helped them and they learned a lesson that they can carry forward. And maybe they taught their own children or somebody else, because I think that that's really all that matters, is that love and the caring and hoping that you impacted them somehow, right?
I couldn't agree more. I think when you strip the ego and the shoulds out of it, it just comes back to love. Like, that's, like,
Yeah.
the one thing that's true and real here. Yeah, and that never dies.
Nope. As that little baby showed me,
Oh god. Yeah,
he
that's
was
so
very
beautiful.
much alive with love in that moment.
Oh, wow. I think that's so beautiful. Thank you so much, Lauren. Where can people connect with you, learn more about you, engage with your programs, if there's anything that you wanna share in terms of how they can work with you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can find me at Lamort Collective on Instagram, or lamort.org. So LAMORT.org. We always have different classes. We have a upcoming class called Storytelling Grief for people who do want to start writing those stories or capture other family members' legacies now before at the very, very end, because it will happen. Like,
Mhm.
there's no harm in starting to capture those stories and think about, like you said, how do I want people to remember me?
Mhm.
It'll happen, and it's usually not when we're expecting it to.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And how do we surrender and just trust that it's all gonna be okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this was such a beautiful conversation. Thank you so, so much for your time here. And listeners, if you enjoyed the podcast, I invite you to leave us a review and share it with anyone who this conversation could support. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you. Bye.
Bye.